So welcome out here, everybody. My name is Nick Kremp. I'm the conservation agent here in Leominster. We're doing a little wetlands winter plant walk out here to familiarize ourselves with some of the wetland plants that we can find out here in some of the conservation areas around Leominster and what they tend to look like in the wintertime. So here we've got our first example. So this is, as you can see, it's got a very red color to it, especially on the newer branches. This is called red osier dogwood, and it is related to flowering dogwoods and some of the ornamental landscaping trees you might be familiar with. It is a dogwood. It's got opposite branching, so the branches originate from opposite sides of the stem instead of alternating along the stem like other plants. It's got these, might be hard to see on the camera, but these kind of pointy little leaf buds here in the wintertime, very small, also opposite from each other. But yeah, it's got that distinctive reddish color, and it is a wetland indicator plant, so it will often be found growing in wetter areas or on the edges of wetlands and river systems and things like that. That's red osier dogwood. So we're here at the small ponds at Prospect Park. And behind me we see another one of our wetland plants in its winter form. This might be a little more obvious to people, but just if you don't know it, this is cattail in the wintertime. So we can see the old leaves, those long blades that stick up and are green in the summertime have died back and are all brown and tan. And then up above those, we see the seed heads, the little like corn dog looking things. Those actually contain like tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of these very tiny little windswept seeds that, as you can see, they'll start to break apart in the wintertime like now and become very fluffy, and that's all the seeds kind of like letting themselves out, and as the wind catches them and starts to blow them away. Very important wetland plant in the ecosystem. They help, they grow via rhizomes, these specialized roots under the soil. So there's this interlocking network of roots all under there, this big mat of cattails, and that helps to prevent erosion and creates a habitat and a food source for a lot of wetlands plants, or wetlands animals. Yeah, so cattail. All right, so here we're at another one of our wetland indicator plants. This is a little bigger than the other ones that we've had, so this is obviously a tree, and a very distinct tree from just the bark here. It's got this mottled, almost like a camouflage pattern type bark, but this is a sycamore. This is a sycamore tree. So obviously very distinct, easy to recognize from the bark, especially higher up. A lot of this darker stuff will begin to flake off and expose this lighter color bark underneath. And especially up towards the branches and stuff, it can get a really bony, white, almost like ghostly appearance. If you'll notice on the top too, they have these little sort of ball-shaped growths, they almost look like tiny little Christmas ornaments. I like to think of them like. But those are the seeds bearing fruits for the sycamore tree. So it makes it a little bit easier to detect in the wintertime when all the leaves fall off, and it exposes those little fruits that are very distinct and unique as far as the trees in this region of the United States go. Sycamores do tend to grow in riparian and wetland areas. You'll often see them growing along the banks of rivers. The little seeds from those seed pods will fall off and drift into the water and can spread that way and take root on the banks. Especially a good spot around Leominster when you're driving on the connector going over the Nashua. If you look out over the trees, you see a lot of that bony white sycamore bark that I was talking about. And a lot of those little balls hanging from the trees. So you can see a lot of sycamores along the Nashua there and along other wetlands around Leominster and Massachusetts. We've gone a little off trail here. We have an old dead tree here, an old snag as they're called, a standing dead tree. And this is an old elm tree. I can tell from the bark, elms tend to have this furrowed, sort of rough-looking bark, and just the general shape of the tree. Different species will have different kind of growth forms. But I can tell this is an old elm, I think an old slippery elm, and you can see there's a giant hollow in the base of the tree here, and probably throughout most of what's left standing here, there's a big hollow, and we can see they've been covered over with the snow, but you can see a couple little animal tracks around the base of the tree here coming into going out of this hollow. So this is just a great active example of the value of keeping these old snags on the landscape. So if you've got some land and you've got some old dead trees that might not be the most, they might be unsightly to your eye, but if they don't pose much of a danger, there is a value in keeping these on the landscape as habitat for different mammals, birds, little bugs and things, and a food source for other little bugs and fungi as well. So they're even after they die, the trees have a big value for the ecosystem out here. Elm trees have a problem in the North America for the last few decades. I believe about the 1950s, maybe the 1940s, there was a fungus imported to the U.S. from Europe, referred to as Dutch elm disease. And it's native to Eurasia, like I said, and they have their own species of elm out there that have co-evolved with the fungus and have their own defenses. So they still get sick and will occasionally die, but they have a natural immunity to it to some extent. Whereas the elms that are native to North America don't have any immunity to that. So eventually they'll catch Dutch elm disease and succumb to it. All right, so yeah, so we found another smaller elm tree here, so you can see it's got alternate branching. So as opposed to the dogwood earlier, the leaf buds are coming out, alternating down the branch and not coming out directly opposite one another. So elm has these small, scaly, if you can see them really closely, they have scales, interlocking scales, these small reddish brown kind of pointy buds. But yeah, that's another indicator of an elm tree. And then sort of a younger elm here, but you can still see that kind of furrowing of the bark, that rough, like tannish, sort of grayish bark. A beautiful example of our next plant here. So this is witch hazel, another plant that you might be familiar with in different supplements and natural like ointments and things. It's an antihistamine, I know, but it has a lot of medicinal qualities. But it is a native to our eastern forests. And one of the few plants that you can observe their flowers in the wintertime. So I believe witch hazel flowers in the late autumn. Some varieties flower in the very early spring, but when you're walking in winter forests and you see these small to medium-sized kind of overhanging trees covered in white or yellow flowers, that is witch hazel. Very beautiful, covered in yellow flowers here. So this looks like what I'd call like a blowdown, right? So you can see the root ball of this tree has been lifted up out of the ground and carrying with it a lot of the soil and stones and stuff that's all interlaced in the roots there. We talked about plant roots, binding the soil together and preventing erosion, so you can really clearly see that with this large tree here, how much soil and rock and everything, all these roots are holding together. So this looks like a tree that blew over in a storm, lifted up this root ball, and we can see it fell off in this direction. It looks like some of the interesting things about these blowdowns is like they're some of the longest lasting, like they leave their mark on the forest for longer than almost anything else, So if you get like a really big old tree that blows down in a storm, like it will leave like this big, it'll pull up all the soil, right, and excavate this hole. And as the tree decomposes and breaks down, it leaves this lump next to this little like divot in the ground, and they call it a pillow and cradle. And those pillows and cradles can last for like 1,000 years or more if you have like a really large tree that blows over, and they think it's like lifting all these big rocks and soil and stuff. It's got this big pile, and then like other trees can grow on top of that and whatever. So and just like with the whales at the bottom of the ocean, it's like all these specialists and like insects and worms and fungi will invade the tree or the remnants of the tree, and it becomes this, like an island in the forest of, like, it's this particular habitat that's only going to last for a few years until the tree breaks down. You can find like grubs and different beetle larvae and all different kinds of things growing in big old snags, like I was saying, or big logs laying on the ground. So you can't see it super well, but this is yet another elm tree here. And if we look down at the root base, well, first of all, it is a wetlands indicator plant. As we can see here, this elm tree is taking up residence in the middle of this stream. And if we look at the root crown, or the base of the tree here at the root base, we can see what's called buttressing of the roots, where they kind of wall out almost like it's on stilts, and that is a big characteristic of elm trees as well. A lot of species of trees will do that, especially if they're growing in very wet soils. They'll tend to do that as maybe some extra support and stabilization, but elm trees particularly will really buttress out very readily. Here we've got a vernal pool behind us. It's frozen over, as you can see, but you can see just the darker color with the water underneath. And like I said, so this is a vernal pool. Vernal referring to the springtime, because these pools are seasonal wetlands that periodically fill and empty out for different parts of the year. So over the winter time and into the spring, they'll tend to fill up with water, and they don't have any major inflows or outflows from other bodies of water, so they're free of larger aquatic animals like fish. And because they're free of fish and they periodically dry out, they're really good habitat for some other more vulnerable organisms, such as amphibians and certain crustaceans, such as fairy shrimp, which are related to the sea monkeys that you might be familiar with. But yeah, they're free of fish, like I said, so the larvae of amphibians like frogs and salamanders are free to develop here in the springtime, and they'll emerge as adults later on before it dries out. So in the early spring, when the rains start to come in, these are good places to come and find some interesting amphibian life, such as spring peepers, spotted salamanders, wood frogs, and some specialized invertebrates like fairy shrimp and others. So, yeah, this is a vernal pool. Even certain species of migratory birds will utilize vernal pools in their, flying over in their migration. And speaking of vernal pools, as a part of this hiking series that we're offering free to the public to check out some of the conservation areas around Leominster, our next hike is going to be a vernal pool hike taking place at Lincoln Woods on Sunday, March 19th. I believe we're starting at 9 a.m., 10 a.m. in the morning, somewhere around there, but there will be information on Leominster City website. But that'll be a vernal pool focused hike, and come and check out maybe some of those specialized animals that we were talking about. Little chickadee. He's brave. Alright, yeah, so we came to the end of our hike here. This is Prospect Park here in Leominster off of Prospect Street. My name is Nick Kremp. I'm the conservation agent here, and we'll be holding more of these free hikes open to the public around Leominster throughout the year, about every month or so. So check out the city website, check out the Conservation Commission Facebook page, some of the other Leominster Facebook pages. We'll be sharing that information as it comes out. But yeah, we hope to see you out here, and it's always a good time. There's always something cool to see and discover. So with that, I'll see you next time.